Why did you get fired? My manager kept losing my class schedule. Worked at a Subway. I had class 2 days a week. Several times he put me on those days anyway. I gave him multiple copies every time. Owner took me off the schedule for calling out too much. When I showed the owner proof, he said it was too late and they already hired someone else. This was 12 years ago. I'm still mad. I always hated the taken off the schedule bull. Just fire me officially instead of taking the coward's route. This happened to me as well when I did not tell the general manager about a floor manager switching a product display TV to football one day. To be clear, she asked me, "Why did you not tell me?" So she already knew it happened and was mad that I did not say anything. So I got taken off the schedule because the other manager did something against policy and I did not narc. A business I went to long ago was hiring and I got the job. Right after I signed all the paperwork, the department manager comes in and asks who I am. I tell him I was just hired as a temp. Manger says he never authorized any hiring and fired both me and my boss on the spot. I did not work for this company at all and they fired me. I had a similar experience. I was interviewing for a sales position and I made it all the way up the ladder through 3 different managers, to the advertising director. Had a great interview. He told me I would be the future of this industry, shook my hand, led me to the HR manager's office, clapped me on the back and said to her, "We're hiring him. Start the paperwork and I'll see you Monday." She was pregnant, tired and annoyed. She looked at me with disgust and said, "We eliminated that position yesterday. We're not hiring anyone." I asked if the director or managers knew that. She said they should. What followed was an embarrassing 2 weeks of promises that they would make a spot for me and weak apologies from the hiring managers. Oof. Hired and fired within seconds. This isn't why I got fired, but this is why I didn't get a job. I was 16 and looking to work at a Dairy Queen as my first job. My mom drove me to the interview and I was super nervous. She looked me in the eye and said, "Just be honest, and be yourself, and you'll do fine." I walked into that interview and when he asked me, "How long do you think you'll work here?" I responded, "Until something better comes along." OMG. My parents had to coach me on how to get a job when I started hunting. They were wondering why none of the jobs I had applied to had called me back, so they started asking questions about the application process. Turns out you shouldn't be honest on those personality assessments, at least not to the extent I was. They basically told me to answer as if I was another person. I got fired once for putting in my 2-week notice. The only other time I've gotten fired was working for a trade company, during the first week. I was a supervisor, and there was a second supervisor on site. I got a call that my wife had been rushed to the hospital, which was literally less than a mile away. I asked the other supervisor if I could go to attend to her, and he said, "Sure, no problem, I've got things here. Go." I returned to the job site later to find the boss there, and he let me go on the spot for leaving the team without a supervisor. He knew what had happened, and still fired me. I won't lie, that one kind of pissed me off. For doing my job too quickly and sitting down the rest of the time. Gas station cashier, 3rd shift. Me, why should I stand when I'm the only person in the store? Manager, it's more professional to stand than sit. Me, then why do you sit in your office? I never understood that. Not once have I walked into an establishment, seen an employee sitting, and gone, "Wow. He's unprofessional." I literally don't give a fuck, as long as you do your job. I went to the emergency room instead of work. Came back with an ER note and they said, "We won't be needing that. Can you come with us?" I was 18 and it was my first full-time job. I had pneumonia and a doctor's note. Came back to work a week later wheezing and puffing an inhaler. Got fired the next week. Joke's on them. I still got unemployment benefits when they tried to fight it. Doctor's notes are good things. Some of these companies literally fight every claim whether they are valid or not. It's disgusting and there should be penalties for such companies. I talked my way into a job at a software company when they put a hiring notice in a local paper. I had no idea what the software did. I still don't. They hired me as a trainer and no one ever explained what the product was. I did a few weeks where I was trained on the software, but literally none of it ever made sense to me. It was like they were speaking gibberish. One day I showed up, a lady I had never seen before gave me a check, and walked me out to the parking lot. No one even ever said, "You're fired," or anything. It's one of the strangest things that ever happened to me. My parole officer wanted to make sure I actually had a job, so he went to my employer listed on my file to surprise visit me on the job. I did home wiring, so I worked at different job sites and rarely in the office. He called me to say he was going to charge me with a violation for lying to him about my whereabouts. This could have landed me back in prison for my remaining 10.5-year sentence. The owner of the company had to speak with him and vouch for me. My parole office didn't charge me, but the owner sure did fire me that day. Finding a job with a felony isn't an easy thing, and it wasn't long before my PO threatened to charge me with a violation if I didn't find a job soon. I refused to come in 15 to 20 minutes early unpaid for my shift. I was always 5 to 10 minutes early, but they decided they wanted me there earlier. I carried on as normal, as I'm not coming in if I'm not being paid. Turned up for a 12 p.m. shift at 11:49, no one would look at me when I arrived, then was thrown in a meeting and fired for being late. Was out the door before it even hit 12. It was the only time I've ever been fired. I was an entitled little shit with a summer job between my junior and senior years in college. I thought I was getting a data entry job. It was indeed data entry to an extent, but most of the work was actually taking items off the shelves in a warehouse and taking pictures of them. These pictures would be scanned and then entered into a system with a description. I thought this was below somebody with my obvious skills as an engineering student who had failed to secure a summer internship in his field. I told my boss that the work was really a two-person job, the other person could do the warehouse stuff, and she agreed and said she'd look into finding another intern to help. I took that to mean I could slack off posting on Warcraft 3 forums all day until they hired the other guy. One day I came home to a voicemail telling me to not bother coming back. I 100% deserved it. I hate my younger self sometimes. I asked the CNA I was working with to stay with a confused patient, while I went and put a new 4 in another patient. The CNA left the patient alone. She fell out of bed and got a big bloody skin tear on her arm. After I took care of that, I went and found the CNA and told her the patient was injured because of her insubordination. The CNA cussed at me and left the unit. I did not see her again that shift. She and another CNA decided on their own to trade assignments. I wrote the CNA up. The CNA went to management and lied about me. She said I called her by a racial slur and yelled at her. I did neither. Management fired me rather than deal with a false claim of racism. I collected unemployment. The CNA did something similar with another nurse a couple of weeks later, and was fired. My manager asked if I could be rehired. HR said no. When my manager quit to start her own nursing agency a year later, she hired me. I got fired for submitting my time sheets on Monday at 8 a.m. when I got into work. By policy, they were to be in by noon on Saturday, but my Fridays ended in the field, so I just did them on Monday mornings. My bosses didn't even look at them until noon on Tuesday, so it had zero impact on them. I drove home from being fired feeling relieved because of how unhappy I was at that job. Time sheets might be the worst part of most jobs. Sometimes they took me over an hour to do for the week because I would do different jobs for like 40 businesses. Then I would need to figure out what to input on my timesheet during the hour that it took me to do the timesheet to begin with. I work in PR and timesheets are the bane of my existence. The higher-ups want to see how you account for literally every minute of your day, usually in 15-minute chunks. So that they know what to charge clients, but obviously, no one works consistently for 8 hours each day, so it just becomes an exercise in BS each week.